Okay, folks, we're gonna get started with Dr. Redwold's presentation here soon. I know how fun it is to talk, but they put together a presentation, so I think it would be great to show them a little bit of being willing to sit down and have a listen, because I think this stuff is really interesting and fascinating. You may not, but if you are in the room, I would love to have you take a seat. We will have time for you to go visit with the booth shortly, but I think we are going to get started with this presentation. So maybe we should bring the bowl. What do you think? Hey, Callan, will you bake the bowl? Yeah, I like it. Okay, do it again. Folks, our next presentation is going to be starting soon.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I am so glad that you guys were able to come up and give this presentation, because I think all that goes on with the EDC is just an important part of supporting you guys as farmers. So thank you for being here today, and I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you so much for inviting us here today. So it's an honor to be here to all of you.
Make sure you're good directional, because they can't hear well online.
Okay. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. All right. So my name is Heather Randbold. I'm the Assistant State Veterinarian here in Alaska. I'm also the Produce Safety Program Manager. And today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about Alaska's Produce Safety Program, as well as the Produce Safety Rule. And this is a rule that was adopted in 2015 by the FDA as part of the Food Safety Modernization Act. Maybe.
Oh,
Oh, boy.
it was working, I swear. Okay, try it now. Okay, yeah, I don't know why, I'm sorry, again, like I said, we're gonna have that tech stuff. I'm gonna stop share, and we'll try that again. I'm gonna do it this way, and go from the beginning. And now try it. There we go. Yay. Woo-hoo.
All right.
Problem solved. All right, I'm
Thank
gonna
you so
sit
much.
here just to make sure.
So why do we care about produce safety in the first place? And why did FDA even implement this produce safety rule? And the reason is foodborne illnesses. There's about 40 million foodborne illnesses per year from the CDC estimates. And almost half of those are attributed to produce. Around 3,000 deaths occur each year as well. And probably about a quarter of those are attributed to produce. So produce safety is a really big deal. And the produce safety rule, again, it was implemented in 2015 by the FDA. Prior to this, there was absolutely no regulation of produce safety. This is the very first mandatory federal standard for produce. The focus of the rule is on the prevention of foodborne illnesses. The goal is to be proactive and not just reactive whenever outbreak does occur. So I'm gonna go over the rule a little bit for you guys, and what is covered by the produce safety rule. Specifically the types of produce covered right now. Anything that tends to be eaten raw is covered in this produce safety rule. So we're talking like your leafy greens, most of your fruits, some tree nuts like almonds, mushrooms, things like that. Anything that potentially can be eaten raw or is most often consumed raw is covered under this produce safety rule. There is produce that is exempt from the produce safety rule, and this is produce that tends to be cooked. So things that are rarely eaten raw, like potatoes or beets or asparagus, things like that. Those are not covered under this produce safety rule. Produce that's meant for your personal consumption or on-farm consumption is also not covered in this rule. So your home garden, for instance, you're not selling it, you're not giving it away, it's not covered by this rule. And then also produce that's destined for some sort of processing to kill pathogens is also not covered in this rule. So if you're growing tomatoes specifically to send for making tomato sauce, that's gonna get heat treated, that is not necessarily covered by this rule either. So now that you know generally what is covered by the rule, I can tell you kind of who is covered, because not every farm is considered covered by this rule. There's three basic categories for the produce safety rule. Those that are exempt, something called qualified exempt, and then fully covered farms. Most farms in Alaska are either exempt or qualified exempt. We have very, very few fully covered farms here. But the guidelines for this produce safety rule are great for everyone to follow, even if you're not a fully covered farm. A really good idea to follow these guidelines to help reduce the chances of foodborne illnesses that stem from your farm. So to be exempt from this rule, you need to be making less than $25,000 of produce sales, covered produce sales, not potatoes, but covered produce sales per year, and this is over a 3-year average. Also, note that this number should be adjusted for inflation as well. This number was implemented in 2015, and we all know things are more expensive now. So I think once you adjust for inflation, the last time we looked, it was like $38,000. So the feds have some sort of website where you can go and adjust things for inflation to see how much you need to be making to be exempt from this. But for right now, I'm just gonna stick with the basic numbers from 2015 because it's just easier to talk that way, but just know that it should be adjusted for inflation. These sales are on a 3-year average as well. So you'll look at your past 3 years of produce sales to get your average. And if it's less than 25,000, you will be exempt from this particular rule. So qualified exempt is sort of a middle category. And those are for producers making more than $25,000 a year in produce sales, again, adjusted for inflation. They also are making less than $5,000 in food sales. So food sales can be basically anything else that's eaten, non-covered produce. So your potatoes and your beets that you're selling as well, meats, eggs, packaged goods, anything that you're selling at your farmers markets or on your grocery shelves, that is considered food sales. So again, greater than $25,000 in produce per year, but less than $500,000 in food sales. And that would make you what we call qualified exempt. The other requirements to be qualified exempt is that you have to be selling the bulk of your produce to a qualified end user. Qualified end user is basically anybody that is not a distributor or a wholesaler. So your farmers market customers, grocery stores that you're selling to, online sales, restaurants, those are considered qualified end users. So if over half of your produce sales are going to qualified end users, you could be considered what we call qualified exempt, as long as you meet the other two requirements as well. All right, and then to be a fully covered farm, it's over $25,000 in produce sales and either over $500,000 in food sales, or the majority of your produce is going to a distributor or wholesaler. So if that's your farm, you are considered a fully covered farm. Again, we don't have a lot of those in Alaska, but we do have a few. All right, so the qualified exemption. If you are a qualified exempt farm, there are a few things that you have to do, pretty minimal. But one is just to provide the name and address of your farm at your food sales. So at a farmer's market, that can just be a placard where you're selling your produce. It can be on your invoice. It can be, you know, on a sticker on your food package or something like that. It just needs to basically have some sort of identification from where the produce is coming from. And then you also need to keep records for 3 years. And that basically just helps to determine your qualified exempt status. So keep your food sales records for 3 years. And then food safety, of course, benefits everyone. Produce safety benefits everyone. So again, even if you're an exempt or qualified exempt farm, which most of you will be, the produce safety rule is still very good practice for you guys to follow, to help prevent any foodborne illnesses that could stem from your farm. And now I'll go over a little about the requirements of the food safety rule, or excuse me, the produce safety rule. The big requirements are sections on worker health, hygiene, and training, soil amendments, water, animals and land use, and post-harvest handling and sanitation. I'm just gonna gloss over each section briefly. At the end, I'll talk to you more about the education that we offer. If you guys want to learn more, go more in depth into the training required for the produce safety rule. All right, so worker health and hygiene and training is the first element of the produce safety rule. Basically knowing your routes of potential contamination, such as your hands, your clothing, your footwear, your tools, etc. Learning how to prevent contamination on these items can really reduce the chances of foodborne illnesses. Things like proper hand washing using soap can really make a difference. This section of the PSR also addresses worker injuries and illnesses, you know, understanding that one shouldn't be harvesting produce if you have diarrhea or vomiting. Probably want to do something else on the farm that doesn't require direct contact with the produce that day. It also covers things like providing toilet and hand washing facilities to your workers so nobody is pooping or peeing in your farm. And the next element of the produce safety rule is soil amendments. Soil amendments, of course, can be a source of contamination, especially those of animal origin, which is what many people use. You know, raw manure, treated manure, composted, etc. The produce safety rule does not prohibit any amendments from being used on your farm, like the manure. But knowing the type of amendment you're using, you know, whether it's raw, whether it's treated, that can really help determine the risks that it poses to your produce. And then it can help you determine your best practices of applying, you know, how long should you apply it before you harvest it and so forth. And also help you to determine your mode of application. You know, there are some ways that you can apply amendments that are less likely to contact the leaf ingredients and so forth. Water is another element of the produce safety rule. I'm not going to go into water too much because there's a lot in the produce safety rule with water. But basically there's requirements for both pre-harvest water as well as harvest/post-harvest water. Similar to the soil amendments, you know, knowing your source, is it surface water like a pond or a stream, or is it groundwater like your well, or municipal water that's been treated? That can help you determine your risks from your water and then help you to direct, you know, how you should apply it and when you should apply your water. All right, animals and land use. Domestic animals and wild animals are definitely a potential source of contamination to produce on your farm. So knowing signs of animal intrusion in your farm is very helpful. It can help you to implement steps to mitigate that intrusion, like fencing off problem areas. You can use decoys, visual audio deterrents that can help you to deter any wildlife from entering those problem areas. Also, keeping pets and livestock away from your produce is a good practice. You're not prohibited from having pets or livestock on your farm. We know most of our farms here in Alaska are multi-purpose and multi-use. So it's not prohibited to have animals on your farm, but try and keep them out of your produce producing areas is definitely a good idea. It can reduce any risks. And then knowing what harvestable or what produce is you shouldn't harvest. If there's bird poop all over one area of your produce, probably don't want to harvest that, right? So we don't want to eat that. So knowing what to pick and what to just leave in the field is very, very important. And then the last section of the produce safety rule is your post-harvest and handling and sanitation. This also focuses a lot on worker training as well. So cleaning and sanitizing your surfaces where you're holding your produce. Again, it talks a bit about, not harvesting contaminated produce with like rabbit droppings or bird droppings on it. Also dropped produce, apples that fall to the ground, you don't want to harvest those. And then it addresses pest management too. Things like, in your packing houses or your areas where you're holding food, you want to make sure there's not birds up nesting in the rafters that can potentially come and poop on your food. Make sure there's not, vole or mouse infestations on the ground that could potentially cause contamination as well. So. And then that was pretty much a very, very brief overview of the produce safety rule itself, or the elements that are in the produce safety rule. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how our Alaska Produce Safety Program can benefit you and your farm. We do this program in collaboration with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, their cooperative extension. And we also get federal funding from the FDA to offer educational opportunities, things called grower trainings, which I'll go over here in a minute. And we also offer on-farm educational visits as well. For most farms covered by the produce safety rule, for farms that are fully covered by the produce safety rule, we also do inspections as required by the FDA. Our goal though is to help you guys and your farm decrease your risks of contamination and potential potential disease outbreaks. All right, so grower trainings are a great opportunity for you and your farm workers to learn more about the specifics of the produce safety rule. It goes into way more detail than I just went into, and then it helps you determine things that you can actually do for your specific farm to help reduce risks of contamination. It is a requirement for covered farms to have at least one person on their farm attend a grower training or an equivalent type of training. However, we recommend it for all farms. Again, most of you aren't covered, but this is a great way to learn about what you can do to help prevent contamination and prevent potential foodborne infections, foodborne outbreaks from your farm. We do offer it as a 2-day virtual course or a 1-day in-person course. We do have a course coming up in Juneau as an in-person course. We're going to offer a course this spring in the Anchorage, Mat-Su area as an in-person. But if there's a lot of interest up here, we can get a grower training going up here, or again, we can do a virtual one as well. It is open to everybody. Again, all farm workers, all farms, highly encouraged to attend. And even better, it's free. There's no charge for it. So if you guys are interested in that, you can email us or come find me or Dr. Sarah Coburn after the meeting, and we can talk to you more about the grower trainings. And educational farm visits are another thing that we can offer to help you kind of identify areas in your farm that may be more potential risky areas for foodborne illness issues. It is also not required to take this or to do this. Even covered farms are not required to have any sort of educational farm visit, not regulatory, but it is basically an inspection, a pre-inspection of your farm to help you identify specific risks to your specific farm. And then what you can potentially do to help reduce that risk. Again, this is free, so I highly recommend you all take advantage of it. It's a great opportunity to learn more about the risks on your farm and specific to your farm. And so in summary, for the produce safety rule, produce safety, food safety is important for everyone, big farms, little farms, everybody. It is very, very important. There's several ways to identify and then reduce your risks of foodborne illnesses. And of course, we are here to offer as much assistance as we can. So technical assistance as well as resources we can offer. Don't hesitate to email us, find us after the meeting, anything to go over this if you guys are interested in any further training or just have some questions about the produce safety rule as well. So our produce safety program people at the Office of the State Veterinarian are myself, Dr. Sarah Coburn, who's in the audience over there, and Dina and Robin are very, very important to our program. They pretty much organize most everything. So, thank you. That's it for the produce safety program. Okay. You guys have any questions?
How does this differ from GAP? How does this
Yes.
safety program differ from GAP?
Dr. Sarah Coburn would love to answer that question for you.
I think there's a lot of samples, so I came into this late, but, I'm Sarah Coburn, I'm the state veterinarian. So the GAP audits are technically voluntary. So it is market driven, so a particular buyer can request that. This is regulatory. The produce safety rule is a regulatory program. It's in the Code of Federal Regulations from the federal government. So for the farms that are required by size and scale of operation to be inspected, it's a mandatory inspection. It's just required. The GAP audits, like I said, are voluntary from a market standpoint, that a particular market may request it, in which case, if you want to sell to that particular buyer, you would have to do it.
Does we go through you or somebody for those audits?
So the GAP audits are run through the Division of Agriculture. The regulatory piece for the produce safety rule is through our office at EDC. Yeah, me and Kurt had been the main contact over there for the GAP audits. So
There isn't, there's not much training that I see in Alaska as far as, yeah. That didn't work. Or whether it was okay or not right.
yeah, and definitely, Division of Ag can give you more details. There's a lot of alignment between the two as far as, I mean,
Looks like.
very, very similar, yeah, and there's been more, the GAP audits came first. Those have been some version of that for quite many, many years before this started. So there was an attempt at kind of, aligning those two. One big difference with the GAP audits, there's kind of a pass-fail. In some of the big outbreaks over the past 20 years, some of the bigger outbreaks that we've heard about in Colorado with cantaloupes and some of the leafy greens, they actually had GAP audits. So that was part of the transition to more of the prevention, like what are we missing systemically? You know, a little more holistically approaching this, that it's not just one day you got to pass-fail, maybe you pass, but there were still some problems on the farm that needed to be addressed. So kind of coming at it from two different angles, but a lot of the same concepts. So we have had some people that knew they were gonna have a GAP audit and they did come to work for us, just as kind of that foundational information. But it's not directly in line, and there's kind of two different reasons people would do them. That's a long answer to your question. Do you have any more questions? Seeing none, I'm gonna, oh, yeah. So the question was, has there been any foodborne illnesses on Alaskan grown products, not specifically products that have been shipped in? The most, I mean, unfortunately, the most publicized one and the biggest outbreak in recent years was the Campylobacter in the peas from Palmer. That was probably about 10 years ago. And there were some, at least one person had Guillain-Barré syndrome and ended up with long-term consequences from that. My understanding is the producer was not able to sustain their business after that. A challenge with foodborne illness, if it's a handful of people here and there, you know, and they're not sick enough to go to the doctor, we never know about them, so they're very much underreported. So, there were some complications, again, my understanding with, not proper sanitizers being used in the water when they're washing peas, and then potentially some contamination of the equipment from cranes that were coming into the field. So they're in the field and on the equipment that was being stored out there. So, again, animal intrusion, cleaning and sanitizing, kind of basic concepts, but it's just incorporating that into management of farms to help everybody, you know, be successful and focus on the other parts of actually growing and marketing their food and, addressing these risks.
Well, I'm just curious, to know how many different kinds of foodborne illnesses exist out there? We hear about certain ones in the newspapers and whatnot, but is there a lot more to the picture than we might understand?
Yeah, there's, so his question was different types of foodborne illnesses. So there's whole different categories of different types of foodborne illness, and different food commodities are gonna be prone to one type or another. So meats kind of have particular ones, produce. In produce, the main ones we hear about listeria, which is a challenging one, and in the number of cases, there's tends to be more severe consequences and more mortalities from that. E. coli, salmonella, and Campylobacter, those are by and large, some variant of one of those is the most common in produce. So it depends on which one would be more likely to be in more processed product versus others, like I said, the sandhill crane was a Campylobacter that's shed by birds. So yeah, there's kind of different management for different ones. Processing facilities can have more issues with listeria because it can be in, you know, drains and some other facility issues, which may be a little different than what might be happening in the field. But there's dairy products kind of have different issues, so different commodities, kind of different points of focus for prevention. But at the end of the day, it's kind of the same concepts, like cleaning and sanitizing and knowing the risks and what viruses people carry, and that's where, you know, vomiting, diarrhea, and training employees and, employee hygiene and, visitor protocols coming out of the farm. There's lots of different ways you can come about it. It would be similar across commodities. Anybody else with any questions? All right, seeing that, I'm gonna hand the mic over back to Mel.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, and thank you, Heather and Sarah, for being here, sharing all your wisdom, and all the things that you do. You're so important to making everything work. So we have a little bit of time before lunch, and you all should have gotten an email about how lunch works. We are to make you a little bit uncomfortable at a conference. You have to sit somewhere else during lunchtime. So we are gonna be putting out these wonderful little pieces on the tables. And each table will have a little bit of a discussion topic, and we'll have a couple of tables that'll have more than one table because there'll be a lot of people out there. But we want you to not just have an eating lunch. We want you to have conversations at lunch about topics. This was our idea back in the beginning, just coming up, but it is free form. We will have somebody at the table sort of helping to monitor, because we don't want one person taking up the entire time and all the other people at the table don't get to say something. But we're gonna try to let it be as a free form conversation about a particular topic as possible. So we have a bunch of them that were suggested to us through surveys that we sent out before the forum got started being really planned. And we may be missing the topic that you're most interested in, and there's going to be a Ask Me Anything table. So you can just have a little none of them fit what I want, go sit at the Ask Me Anything table. And, we've got, a couple of folks that are gonna sit there and hopefully be able to answer those questions. This is a new thing, we're trying, bear with us and have fun with it. We want you to have conversations. So you got about 20 minutes now to kind of wander around, look at the tables that are here, ask questions of them, talk to each other. We're gonna have lunch, it's gonna be at noon. And, this is, like I said, get your food, sit down, have conversations. That's the whole idea of lunch today. Anybody have any questions about that? I hope that all works for everybody. What's that? Okay, hold on just a sec.
Also just a quick note, while we have a minute to kind of wander around, if anybody is interested in signing up for, Golden Heart Drug or the Interior Ag Directory, or just have questions for me in general, I have a sign-up sheet over there that you're welcome, just put your name, number, and, email, and that's all I want to say, thank you.
Great. All right, thanks, and folks,